Okay, so Shari Pema. Hello, my name is Lo Sandunya. So we're going to now learn the art of Nalanda debate. Are you ready?
Yes, ready.
Okay, ready. Good. So when we are debating, we have various kinds of questions, really two main kinds of questions. And the first kind of question is called a pervasion question. Or you could call it a statement of pervasion because it's phrased as a declarative statement, even though the answer comes in either affirming or negating. You either affirm or you deny it. So it's like a yes or no question when it comes down to the meaning. So the phrasing of it basically is this. We say first the word it follows and then an if-then statement. So it follows that if it is A, then it's necessarily B. So what could we make a statement like the color of grass? So we have grass and plants around here. So the color of grass. It follows that if it's the color of grass, then it's necessarily green. And then you clap. That marks the end of your question. So that's a question, really, right? It's just phrased as a declarative statement, but it's saying, what do you think it means? It follows that if it's the color of grass, then it's necessarily green. Would you accept that, or do you think that's true or not true?
I accept that.
You accept that. Okay, so if you accept that, then exactly like you said, you just say, I accept.
I accept.
Okay. Now, if you were to deny it, then you could say, instead of I accept, you could say, why? Okay, so what if I ask you something like, it follows that if it is a tree, then it's necessarily a magnolia tree.
Why?
Why? Right. So those are the two answers that you are allowed to give in the Nalanda debate after asking this kind of pervasion question. Why or I accept. Now, we'll get back to the I accept in a moment, but when you said why to the second question, then it means that when you look at all the different types of trees that exist in the universe, anything you've ever learned about or know about, then you should be able to find one, at least one, which is something that is a tree but is not a magnolia tree. So since you said why, now I can ask you, give an example. So give an example of something which is a tree but is not a magnolia tree.
Jasmine.
A jasmine tree. Okay. So you say jasmine tree. Now I'm going to come back and now I'm going to make the second kind of question. This will double check to make sure that you really are confident in your answer there. So the second kind of question is called a thesis question. Now, again, it's phrased as just a declarative statement, but since when you're answering, you have to answer it like a yes or no question, we can call it a question. So it goes like this. Take the subject, the jasmine tree. It follows that it is a tree.
I accept.
Good. So exactly right. You say I accept again. So those are, again, the same two answers here that you can give. So now a pervasion question and a thesis question. Even though the questions are worded differently, the answers are the same. You either say I accept or why. So what happened here? We took a thesis. That means it's a combination of a subject and a predicate. The subject was jasmine, a jasmine tree. The predicate was a tree. So take the subject, a jasmine tree. It follows that it's a tree. Okay, you accept. So now, when you gave that as an example of something which is a tree but not a magnolia tree, so the first part, the fact that it's a tree, we're double checking, you accepted. So now I get to ask you for a reason though. So take the subject, a jasmine tree. It is a tree because? Now I'm asking you to give a reason.
Because it has a trunk.
Because it has a trunk. Very nice. So this is the perfect way to get into the art of the debate. Because now you've given a reason. So now it gets a little more complex. Because what has to happen for a reason to be a correct reason or a flawless reason? Well, two things. it has to be true of the subject. So we had two things so far, and now we're adding a third thing, a reason. We had a subject, a predicate. Now we added the reason that you just gave me. Okay, so the subject, jasmine tree. Predicate, tree. Reason, because it has a trunk. So the reason is having a trunk, right? Because it has a trunk. So if the reason is a flawless reason, if it really, in other words, can prove the thesis that a jasmine tree is a tree, it needs to fulfill a few qualities, have a few things that are true about it. One, it needs to be true of that subject. So, is it true that a jasmine tree, the subject, has a trunk? That's one thing. The second thing it needs to fulfill is there needs to be what we call pervasion. That means logical necessity. In all cases, at all times, is it true that if it has a trunk, then it's necessarily a tree? So that's what I'm going to ask you next, to double check that your reason is correct. It follows that if, so now another statement of pervasion is coming, if it has a trunk, then it's necessarily a tree?
I accept.
Okay, so you accepted that. So now what I can do is now I can come up with an exceptional case. Something which has a trunk but is not a tree. Take the subject, a Honda Civic. It follows that it is a tree.
Then,
So
why?
Why? Good, right. You got it, right? So those two answers, either I accept or why. So now I'm going to give you a reason. Okay, so after I give you a reason, then you have to pick between two different answers. So up till now, you've been answering with either I accept or why. So let's give a reason, and then the options for your answers are going to vary a bit. They're going to change from I accept or why. So let's do it. Take the subject, Honda Civic. So now I gave a new subject, right? A Honda Civic. It follows that it is a tree, right? So now it makes sense, right? Why are we saying it follows? It follows from the reason you gave. It logically follows. That's why we use the phrasing, it follows. So from the reason you gave, it follows that it is a tree because it has a trunk.
Why?
So now, so now the responses that you can give to a reason are a little different. So to the reason, you either will say, reason is not true, or you can say no pervasion. So reason is not true means that the reason, having a trunk, is not true of this subject, the Honda Civic. It doesn't apply to the Honda Civic. If you say the reason is not true, it means you're saying, in the end, the Honda Civic doesn't have a trunk. That's what the response of the reasons not true means. If you give the response no pervasion, it means that yes, it's true that a Honda Civic has a trunk, but there is no pervasion or logical necessity, no logical entailment that whatever has a trunk is necessarily a tree. Now this full thing with a subject, a predicate, and a reason, we call that a syllogism, right? It's got these three parts. So it's a logical syllogism. So take the subject, a Honda Civic. It follows that it is a tree because it has a trunk. Okay, so do you remember from the two responses which one you want to give?
No pervasion.
No pervasion. Okay, so I'm going to restate it to you. Restate the pervasion statement to make sure you want to accept it. So you said no pervasion. So it follows that if it has a trunk, so it just means anything, right? If whatever thing you can imagine, if it has a trunk, then it is not necessarily a tree?
I accept.
Oh, you accept. So you accepted the exact opposite before, right?
Yeah,
So now
I know.
what happens is you just gave the exact opposite of a previous thing you accepted. You contradicted yourself. So what do we have to say? Strike. You get a strike. Okay?
Because trunk, we did not say what a trunk was.
We didn't say what a trunk was. That's right. So that's why there's a lot of freedom here, because you could have said, so you said no pervasion. So now that means that you no longer accept that if it has a trunk, it's necessarily a tree, you could have said the reason's not true, which means that a Honda Civic doesn't have a trunk. And then you would have the freedom to then define trunk in a more specific way, which eliminates car trunks from being included in the category of trunks, right? Maybe, so that's another option if you want to go that way. Or you could just change your view, right? You can change your position and just say, oh, I was wrong, actually. Cars have trunks, they're not trees. Elephants have trunks, they're not trees. Lots of other things have trunks, right? Houses have trunks. Houses have, chest trunks, right? So there's a variety of trunks. Now, that's one way. Or you can actually just deny the reason, say the reason is not true of that subject. Why? Because a trunk is defined as, and then you define it as something, the base of a tree or large plant. Okay, and then a car trunk you would have to say is, well, a car trunk is not a trunk, it's a car trunk. It's a different thing. So far, everything that comes up in a debate basically has come up already. So the art of it is just learning to use those different kinds of statements and those two kinds of questions, and then giving the responses as you move along and get more clear and clear about a topic. So let's try another question, and then I'll hand it to you to ask the questions. Let's go back to that first question again. It follows that, so remember you accepted it, so you can change, but you did accept it before. It follows that if it's the color of grass, then it's necessarily green.
Why?
Why? Okay, so I immediately will give you a strike. Okay. But that means now I can ask you for an example. Okay, so posit an example. Something which is the color of grass but is not green.
Which is the color of grass but is not green.
Yeah, because the pervasion question was, it follows that if it's the color of grass, then it is necessarily green. So that means that if it's true, everything in the universe which is the color of grass, wherever there is a color of grass, wherever there's grass, then its color is green, right? You said why? That means there's some place, some time where there is an instance of something that's a color of grass, which is not green, not the color green. So can you posit that example?
Leaf.
Take the subject a leaf. It follows that it is the color of grass.
I accept.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you for a reason again. Take the subject a leaf. It's the color of grass because... So it's hard, right? But that's the good thing. Sometimes.
Are you asking me
why is a leaf the color of grass?
Why leaf is the color of grass?
Yeah, you see, we often don't really think about the reasons for things so much, right?
Because it has chlorophyll.
Because it has chlorophyll. There you go. Okay, because it has chlorophyll. So if it has chlorophyll, then it's necessarily the color of grass.
I accept.
It's necessarily the color of grass. So take the subject grass. It follows it is the color of grass.
I accept.
Take the subject grass. It follows that it is a color.
Why?
It follows, so I'll give you a reason. It follows that it is a color because it is the color of grass.
I no longer understand what you're saying. So
okay, good. Where's the confusion coming?
The first question was the color of grass.
Yeah, so the color of grass, you accepted there's a pervasion. If it's the color of grass, it's necessarily... you didn't accept the pervasion. It's necessarily green. You gave an example, a leaf. So you said a leaf is a color of grass. Okay, I let that go. And then you gave the reason because it has chlorophyll. Now because you gave that reason of chlorophyll, now I chose a new subject because I'm testing it or examining it. I'm going to analyze, does it really make sense that if something has chlorophyll, it's necessarily the color of grass? So now I took a new subject. Take the subject grass.
But is the color of grass green? Or is that just the color of grass?
We haven't gone there yet, right? So we have to take each question at a time. So now I'm just testing, is a leaf Because you already denied that if it's the color of grass, it's necessarily green, and you gave an example, subject, a leaf. So now we're checking that leaf. Is the leaf the color of grass? Okay, so to check that, you gave a reason. Now to check that reason, I gave a new subject. So you see how quickly it moves into a new question, right? So take the subject, grass itself, follows that it is its own color.
Its own color. Except.
Take the subject, grass. It follows that it is a color.
Why?
Because it is its color. It's the color of itself.
Why?
So now you have to say either the reason's not true or no pervasion. So the reason's not true would mean that grass is not the color of itself.
Yeah, the reason is not true.
The reason's not true. Take the subject, grass. It follows it is not the color of itself.
I accept.
Oh, strike. Oh, strike. Take the subject, grass itself. It follows it is not the color of grass.
It's not the color of grass. The subject is not the color of grass.
The subject, grass. So
Grass.
think of grass. Just think of grass in your mind. And we're asking the question of it. What's the predicate? Follows that it is not. So it's a predicate with a negation. Follows that it is not the color of grass. So we're asking, is grass the color of grass or not?
No.
It's not the color. So take the subject, grass. So hold grass in your mind. And what are we asking about it? What is its quality or predicate? It follows that it is not the color of grass.
I accept.
You accept. Oh, strike.
Why did you strike me now?
Because you previously accepted that grass is the color of grass.
Yeah.
You said it's the exact opposite of what you had accepted before. I asked, so the exact opposite simply means when you put a negation in. So first I asked, take the subject grass, it follows it is the color of grass. You said I accept. Now I said take the subject grass, it follows it is not the color of grass. You also accepted. You accepted
Yeah, okay.
A, and you also accepted not A. And so we're just using simple things like colors because we all see them and they're very present in our lives, as long as if you're fortunate enough to have working eyes. But you know, there's something that when we know so well, but when you start to apply logic, then you realize, well, there's things you haven't really thought about before.
Yeah.
Just how to think of a reason to really, prove some idea that you hold to be true, some belief or concept you hold to be true. And so here you posited, again, to backtrack, I asked for an example of something which is the color of grass but is not green, and you said a leaf is the subject. So I left that, and then you gave the reason of having chlorophyll. All right, so that's right. It's a good thing we're saying this because I forgot the reason. So now you just accepted that grass is not the color of grass. So now I can use the reason you gave. Okay? Chlorophyll, right? It has chlorophyll. Take the subject, grass. It follows it is the color of grass because it has chlorophyll. So now you say either, which two answers can you choose from now with the reason?
It's not true.
Not true or no pervasion.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying not true. So that means, right, I'll just restate it. Take the subject, grass. It follows that it does not have chlorophyll.
It does, right?
It does. It sure does. It sure does. So why, right? So now you're denying a negation, so that means you accept it has chlorophyll. So take the subject grass, it follows it does not have chlorophyll. So you want to deny that, right?
Yeah.
So either Y or I accept are your two options.
Why?
Y. Oh, strike. Follows it does have chlorophyll.
I accept.
Strike. Take this, now I'll give it as the reason again. So there's sometimes you just have to repeat. You do it just like this. You go step by step. And then you just repeat the same exact reason that was just given, but after we went through and you thought about it for a minute and you said, wait a minute. No, grass does have chlorophyll. I can't deny that. So Now I'll put it back into the reason to prove what I'm trying to prove. Take the subject grass, follows that it is the color of grass because it has chlorophyll.
Why?
So
Not
now you want to say the reason is not true again? What does that mean?
But you're saying that the grass is the color of grass, which is not true. Right?
No, but what's the reason? The reason has to, so when you posit a reason, that's why we switch our responses, right? After just the thesis, right? Just the subject and predicate. Take the subject grass, it follows it's the color of grass. That's your chance to just accept or deny. So you would just say why, right? So you don't want to accept that grass is the color of grass at this point.
Yeah.
But now I gave a reason, and you just accepted the reason. You just told me grass does have chlorophyll, right? So take the subject grass, it follows that it is the color of grass because, now I'm proving it with a reason, because it has chlorophyll. So now your response, your answers are going to be picking from either the reasons not true or no pervasion. So which one do you want to use? If you use the reasons not true, you just completely contradicted yourself again.
Yeah.
Now you're saying that grass doesn't have chlorophyll again.
No, but I'm saying that the grass is, and then the color of the grass is the quality of the grass, so it cannot be the grass.
So you're focusing on the subject and the predicate together, but we've brought the reason. So this is what happens when you bring a reason in. Now you have a full syllogism with these three parts: subject, a predicate, and a reason. So what are the three parts? I mean, what are they? The subject, predicate, and reason are the general names, but right now in this reason, what are the three? Subject?
So it's the grass.
Grass. Predicate?
The color of the grass.
Color of the grass.
And
The
having
reason.
chlorophyll.
Having chlorophyll. Perfect. So when you give that reason, you think about, okay, do I want to say the reason's not true or no pervasion? So what is the relation of the reason to the other two parts? Well, when you just look at the reason in relation to the subject, that's when you would say the reason's not true. So that means if you completely forget the predicate and you're just looking to see, is grass something that has chlorophyll? Does grass have chlorophyll? Okay, if you think not, then you forget about the predicate altogether and you just say the reason's not true. Predicate doesn't even matter. Now, if you think, no, it's true. The reason is true of that subject, and you said it. Grass has chlorophyll. Okay, so you're not going to want to answer the reason it's not true. Now what you do is you forget that subject. Just leave that out. And you just look at the relation between the reason and the predicate. Again, what kind of relation does it have to have? A relation of logical necessity or pervasion. So what we say here, if it's something which has chlorophyll, if it has chlorophyll, you can say, same meaning. If it has chlorophyll, then is it necessarily the color of grass? Okay, if you accept that, then you have no out. You've accepted the whole combination of the subject, predicate, reason. But if you don't accept that pervasion, then you can say the second response of no pervasion. Again, what does no pervasion mean? It means that you don't accept that if it has chlorophyll, it's necessarily the color of grass. So, what do you think? You have these three parts of the syllogism. Grass, color of grass, has chlorophyll. And now you have two options. You either can deny that grass has chlorophyll, or you can deny the pervasion. That if it has chlorophyll, then it's necessarily the color of grass.
I accept.
You accept all of it. So take the subject. So good. So take the subject, grass, it follows that it is the color of grass.
Because the two together always make sense, but the three together don't make sense.
So take the subject, grass, it follows it is the color of grass. So if it all makes sense, that means that you have to accept the thesis that grass is the color of grass. So what's wrong with the syllogism? Where does the reason not give you enough proof? I'm giving you the reason as proof, right?
Yeah.
So you accepted it. So what does it prove?
Yeah.
It proves the thesis. So take the subject, grass, it follows it is the color of grass because it has chlorophyll.
Because of the chlorophyll, the grass has the color.
No, the grass is the color of grass because it has chlorophyll.
No, that is simply not true.
What about it is not? See, this is the good thing. So you know it's not true. You know the thesis is not true. But what about the reason can't prove that thesis to be true? So is grass something that has chlorophyll? So does grass have chlorophyll? No doubt. No doubt about it. A little bit, but not much.
Fresh grass. Fresh grass has
We'll say
chlorophyll.
fresh. We can specify, sure, fresh grass.
Yeah.
But that's true. You do want to be careful about
Yeah.
making too broad a statement because dead grass maybe doesn't, right? Anyway, fresh grass,
Like I
sure.
did with the trunk.
Right. But we'll just keep in mind that we mean fresh grass when we say grass. That's fine. Okay. So you don't have any doubt. Do you have any doubt then about the pervasion? So if it has chlorophyll, is it necessarily the color of grass?
No.
No. Okay. Whew. So you see, you learned something, or at least you found a way to answer the question. So to say it again. So this time using the correct phrasing of the response. Take the subject, grass. Follows it is the color of grass because it has chlorophyll.
Why?
So now you would say either no pervasion.
No.
No pervasion. No pervasion. Okay, so no pervasion. So now you restate this pervasion, meaning when you denied it, did you say when you restate it, you can say if it has chlorophyll, it is not necessarily the color of grass. Okay, so restate the pervasion. That's what I just said.
If it has chlorophyll, it is not necessarily the color of grass.
Not necessarily the color of grass. Okay, so can you give another example besides grass? How about
Leaf.
a leaf? Okay, good. And that's where we started from, right?
Yeah.
Take the subject a leaf. It follows that. Take the subject a leaf. What do I want to ask about it? Well, same question. It follows that it is not the color of grass. Oh, strike. Oh, strike. So that went all the way back up to the first example you posited. Right? You posited grass as something which is the color of grass. Sorry, not grass. You posited the leaf, right? You posited the leaf as an example of something which is the color of grass, but is not green. So all that time we just spent about 15 or 20 minutes got us back to finally getting to that first example and then seeing how there's a contradiction, right? Where you had to accept that, that the initial thing you posited is not true. So the leaf is not the color of grass, right? Does that make sense, or you want to say it is?
Makes sense.
It's not the color of grass. Why? It's not a color at all. Right? It's not even a color. It's not even a color. The leaf is not a color.
The whole world looks different.
There we go. That's the beauty of Nalanda Tradition.
Amazing.
Okay.